What's going on, everyone? Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks and Game Time. We're still going through the Patriots rookie class, trying to get all the inside info and insights that we can into these guys' games so we can best appreciate them and also have some idea of how they're going to fit into this new version of the Patriots. And today, we're talking wide receivers with one of the most detailed analysts in the game, someone whose clips I regularly go to make sure, like I said before the show when we were behind the scenes, make sure I'm up to stuff and I know all my stuff about these guys. So without further ado, Matt Waldman, the creator of the Rookie Scouting Profile, one of the absolute best resources if you're trying to understand these draft classes. Matt, how you doing, brother? And welcome back to the show.
Hey, I'm doing great, Taylor. Thanks so much for having me again. And I had such a good time last time. I'm glad that I get to do it again. So
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, brother. So before the Patriots got their shiny new weapons, they drafted a shiny new quarterback, Drake May out of UNC. Now, at first glance, it seemed like Polk and Javon Baker were the perfect fits for someone like Drake May, who likes to go downfield. Accuracy is a bit up and down at times, but really looking at his college tape, it's just like this guy needs some ball winners. You got Tez Walker, who brings the speed, but really some guys who can go up and win at the catch point, and it seemed like the Patriots checked those boxes. So from your perspective, how well do you think Polk and Javon Baker are going to fit, both with Drake May and his skill set and what we might be seeing with Alex Van Pelt and the kind of offenses he's historically been running?
I mean, I think that it's a good fit in theory for sure, because whether it's going to be May or it's a quarterback down the line, I mean, let's be real in the fact that, first round quarterbacks don't have a high hit rate. So you may be looking at 6 to 8 years before you find that quarterback who is going to be the guy. It could be May. May certainly has enough skill sets available to maybe turn into that guy, even if I haven't been as high on him as some other people are. So when you look at, when you look at what Polk does really well, he's very strong at being able to earn position to win the ball. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the great strengths of his game. There are a lot of guys who can extend and catch a football with an athletic extension, but they don't know how to position themselves to keep the ball between themselves and the defender, and they open up their bodies to the defender too much. Polk doesn't do that. He's very good at really earning that position and then transitioning downhill to earn additional yardage. And he's someone that I think the light switch kind of goes on and off with him in terms of some of the artistry that you want to see with some of his releases and routes. But it's the tools are there, the techniques are there, but maybe the artistry in terms of being able to execute with that patience and suddenness. You have to have a contrast of patience and suddenness. Watch someone like CeeDee Lamb or Devontae Adams, and you're going to see someone who's slow. It's like a running back, slow to the hole, then fast to it. You want to see him be able to set the guy up with a little bit of a slower pace and then just hit the gas, whether it's in the short area with a couple of steps. So he's just got to learn how to really develop that in that level. But I think what he does after the catch, you can put him in situations where you can scheme Polk to get the ball in space and he can get yards for you. You can get, and the same thing with Baker, really. Both those guys are good yards after the catch producers. So you don't necessarily have to just have them run timing routes all the time. And that's good because early on in their careers, they're not going to be the best at timing routes, just like most rookie wide receivers, but they do have the ability to develop into starters rather quickly. I think that both of them can at least be good contributors for the offense and be rotated in and out and get enough volume that by the middle of their rookie contracts, they're going to be reliable starters.
That's exciting. It's funny you also mentioned the patience with Jalen Polk, because I actually got to speak to his trainer, Delphonte Diamond, who does an excellent job. That was one of the things he highlighted, was that patience and being a little more consistent in his routes. And when it comes to yards after the catch, Gerard Mayo did touch on that with Javon Baker, which was kind of surprising because when you look at his profile, he wasn't really a short target when he was at UCF. He was more of a deep guy and one of the more productive guys in the country in that vein. But when you look at the tape with Polk, is he the most explosive guy? Not necessarily, but you see the toughness. He also mentioned using his stiff arm and using his physical gifts to be the best yards after catch guy he could be. That's definitely present there. And with Baker, there are some throws where he'll get targeted in the flat. A corner will have him dead to rights. And there's one, I think it was against Kansas, where he eats the contact. The guy slides off him. He stiff arms somebody else and then fights for even more yards after that. So I like that you brought that up because the downfield stuff, again, with May is what's exciting. And that's what kind of pops into your head. But kind of that well-rounded skill set as they develop, as you mentioned, the timing routes, that'll be really interesting. Now I want to get into role a little bit, starting with Jalen Polk, because he's someone where I kind of have compared him to Jakobi Meyers, less route running savvy just because Jacoby's so good in that department, but a little more juice. Where Jacoby, I felt like it had to be like every once in a while you could throw him a little fade from inside the numbers. But Polk, as we saw in that explosive Washington offense, it felt like he really could win, not only from different spots, but really be able to challenge vertically. So how do you see his fit? Do you think he is more of a Z slot, or do you think he could be an X receiver in certain personnel packages and has that true type of versatility?
That's a great question, and I love the comp to Jakobi Meyers. I wish I could have that pre-draft because I compare players on spectrums. And so to me, Jalen Polk was kind of like a better version of Marquez Callaway, who I think a better version of Marquez Callaway is Jakobi Meyers. And I think the guy that both he and Myers would aspire to be if they had I think Jalen Polk doesn't quite have that level of athletic ability, but he has more than Jakobi Meyers does. The aspiring guy would be CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb would be the top guy on the archetype, the guy who could play all three positions, really thrive in the slot. But if you need him as a flanker, he can run after the catch. If you need him as a split end, because of his positioning skills, because of his leaping ability and timing, the ability to block out defenders and earn position during the stem at the top of the stem, and having enough speed to do so, I absolutely think Polk can be a split end in certain packages. Is he the ideal split end at 6'2"? Probably not. He and Baker are kind of interchangeable in terms of physical types. You're seeing one at 6'2", 204, and then with Baker, you're looking at a guy who's 6'1", 202. And Baker, to me, is a little bit more of a nat. Right now, they're still developing. So if you look at Polk, he's more of a natural split end as a positioner to the ball, where Baker can do that, but he's maybe not quite as good as Baker as a route runner. Like I actually like Baker more than Polk if you're judging them on a wide spectrum of players. They're not far apart, but I was higher on Baker. So Baker to me is a more complete route runner at this stage who can give you some of that contested catch ability. He has some highs and lows with his hands positions with certain plays that maybe at the high end level of like comparing him to CeeDee Lamb, he would fall short a little bit. But to me, like, again, the guy who would probably be below CeeDee Lamb, but above Jakobi Meyers would probably be Jeremy Maclin. And that's who I comped him to.
Okay.
I comp Baker more to a Maclin type of player. And then the guy that everyone looked at, or a lot of people looked at and thought he was somehow going to become that next guy was Van Jefferson, but Van Jefferson never really worked out because his hands were not great, and he's not a great separator. He's more that guy that gets lost behind the third level of coverage based on long developing play action looks, and that's how he gets deep. Baker's more of a guy that you can probably win. He can probably win against a lot of guys in man coverage, maybe not the top guys all the time, without really getting his skills up to snuff. But I'd say Baker's better with breaks, some setups, whereas Polk is a little bit up and down with those, and that's just the small difference. And I would say that Polk is probably better at the catch point, though Baker has some real highs in that category. He's just also a clap attacker at times where Polk isn't. And so some of those are just difficult to do. Sometimes you're just making adjustments, and sometimes I would laugh because some receivers are probably like, forget it. I'm just going to use one hand because I'm probably going to do better just getting one hand up here than I am trying to get two up at the same time without clapping it. So, but Baker's a little better after the catch, whereas Polk, I think, is one of those guys that can win after the catch, but sometimes the way he reads the field is a little wonky. Like when you ask him to go against the grain, sometimes he doesn't recognize those opportunities as well as I think Baker does. And Baker's a tackle breaker. Baker's very good at transitioning. Like you want your receivers, the minute they catch the ball with their back to the downfield defender, is to turn tight and head downhill immediately and not try and go east-west. And Baker's great at that. He might be the best receiver in this class at transitions where he pulls through a tackle because he's violent with the turn downhill and he heads straight through and pulls through contact. And he can pull through multiple points of contact from defensive backs. So you get him in space, and whereas, I think that's why he's a natural as a flanker to me. But if you need him to be split in, it's kind of like he and Burton Jermaine Burton are very similar players, if you ask me. I think Burton's a little more advanced as a route runner, but Baker and Burton have a similarity in terms of being tough after the catch, being, they're capable of being physical, and they're capable of giving you opportunities to play all three roles where you need them. So the fact that they're interchangeable makes it maybe harder if the coaching staff tries to make them all around three position players right away. You might get that Brandon Ayuk type of slow adjustment level, or what the Chiefs are looking for. And now you're looking at, and you go, well, I thought these guys were going to hit right away. And if they're asking them to play all three positions, that might be too much, because not only are they figuring out where to align, but now they're having to read defenses in multiple ways and have the adjustments that are position specific. And they're having to do it with a rookie quarterback, possibly, who is also learning that stuff. And then, so that's why it would be nice to see May sit. And if they make good on their promise that, yeah, we can let May sit all year and let Jacoby handle it, I'd like to see them do that, because that gives Drake May a fighting chance to be confident on these types of small details, where he's not having to do all that and learn the playbook and learn a new city and learn a new practice regimen and learn a new development regimen and the speed of the defenses and being famous and having money and all those things that just take up bandwidth. They're just natural things that you go to a new town and for a new job, and you got 8 million things going on, and you're probably going to be beat that first day. When you travel, you go back to your hotel and you're like, I don't want to do anything right now. I just want to lay down. That's what he's going through year one. So that minor little adjustment on, for the X or the Z on the slant that could possibly go for running a different type of route, that's one of a million little adjustments. So these guys trying to be on the same page. I'd rather the quarterback be confident about all that stuff, or at least his footwork, the offense, all these other things. And then they can, these little adjustments with routes can be minor things. That's what Jordan Love got to do, because he got 3 years and then he inherited young receivers. I'm hoping Elliott Wolf has observed that part and is okay and gets Kraft to sign off on the idea of, let's let May sit at least a year. So all these little things that won't regress, all these little things that he has to deal with, he won't regress in areas where people are like, well, Matt Waldman, I thought you said he could do this, but he's not doing this on the field right now. I'm like, yeah, because he's thinking about 8 million other things, and this thing falls backwards. So Baker and Polk getting to work with Jacoby Brissett would be a nice thing, because Brissett's also been in a room with Amari Cooper, who is a consummate technician, and Amari Cooper would be at the top of the chain of both of these guys in terms of archetype in either direction you want to go, as an X who's the ball winner or who can run after the catch, or the route technician who can also give you after the catch stuff.
Matt, this is why I come to you, because in terms of the mental things that they all have to go through, I didn't even really consider how tough it would be for them to really try to be those true multi-positional players. And then obviously the mental hurdle of being a new quarterback. You think about learning the playbook and all of that, but you're right. There's stuff about just moving. The guys from North Carolina spent his whole life there, being famous. Those are things that I never really even considered. But you're right. I literally moved to Boston a year ago, and just as small as that was, like being on the beat, new lifestyle, moving into an apartment, it felt like I really didn't settle in until about like 4 or 5 months in, like when the season had already picked up. So that's fascinating. Some of the things you said about Javon Baker also, one, I love the guy. Like, I kind of agree. I think he's going to probably be more of an impact player than Polk, whether it's early on or down the road. Just the separation, I feel like, gives him a higher ceiling, and that mentality. This dude's different. But when you talked about the Amari Cooper, I'm actually writing a piece right now, and I alluded to that, where with the Browns, that was their guy, where it's like, all right, it's man coverage. We're just going to Amari because we got an easy answer on the backside. which was something Elliott Wolf said the offense didn't have before the draft. And on top of that, the yards after catch. I think I tweeted it a couple of days ago where forget the team they were playing, but Javon Baker's like coming back downhill against zone. He jumps up and makes the catch. And you see how quickly he does turn on that I'm a runner. As soon as it comes in, you see him look at where the defender is. He already feels like he knows, adjusts his body, and that makes it tough on the tacklers because if you're not in position, he knows where you are. He spins out of it and then has that toughness where he fights through contact where I'm excited. Knowing that you saw the same thing, that's awesome because it was very impressive for a guy who, again, wasn't really a short target in college.
No, and it's one of those things that, you're going to get like the social media, high school football coach or former high school football player who's going to say, well, yeah, guys, but that, everybody gets taught that in high school. Yes. If you have a decent high school coach, you're going to get taught what a good transition is. It's good that you remember that. Okay. But the best football players, the highest level, they're just executing fundamentals on the most consistent level and know how to apply them in ways that you should apply them in theory. And they do it, tirelessly. The thing is that there are a lot of players who don't have that level of high school coaching, who are just very talented athletically or have certain skills down, or they just weren't always good. Not every receiver is good at everything. Just like, you could name your favorite guitarist and you ask them, and there are some studio musicians who could play country music, bluegrass and jazz and R&B, and they could kill all of it, and sound like all the guys who are the leading stylists in those genres. And then you have some people who you just hire for heavy metal, because that's what they can do, and they do it better than anybody else, but that's all they do. Now, in the theory of what you should learn as a guitar player, there are certain things that you are supposed to learn, but some people worked at some things more than others or weren't made aware of it. So, there's a lot of guys like Marquise Lee back in the day with the Jaguars, great after the catch receiver when he was in the open field but he didn't know how to transition well. And he was one of those guys that would lose 3 yards trying to gain another 30 when he could have just gained 5, And it's just like the running back, like Lawrence Maroney back with the Patriots when he bounced everything outside. When there are certain plays that you're like, dude, I'd rather you gain 2 or lose 2 rather than lose 5 trying to gain 50. And that's what the value of transition is. So the fact that Baker does that, it's unusual, even if it seems like a just mundane technique point or conceptual thing that's taught, even in the lower levels of football.
We got a lot more to talk about. I'm already fired up. I got to make sure we pay the bills. So quick word from our friends at Prize Picks. Be right back. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball and hockey entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I personally love Prize Picks because they're super easy to use, easy to navigate, and they offer injury insurance, so your entries stay live even if one of your players gets injured. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So, Matt, you mentioned Javon Baker and how there's parts of his game that you could really easily overlook that kind of make him stand out. I'll say when I was going through the process, a lot of the time I'm just trying to make sure I have an understanding of what these guys are good at. I can't really do the deep dives I want to. So before this process, I thought Baker was an exciting guy. I really liked him as like a 3rd, 4th round target for the Patriots. But because I think a lot of people do like him, when I saw some of the drops and some of the, I think it's kind of like Drake May's turnover-worthy plays, where they're so bad, they don't happen a ton if you're watching game after game. But when they happen, it's like, oh, that was really ugly. I understand why people think that's kind of your old profile. But with Baker, I feel like you can nitpick the inconsistencies for sure. And every young player has those. But I also feel like there's so many little details in his game that do set him apart, and why I think he's going to end up being, like I said earlier, one of the bigger contributors, especially for a rookie, but likely is going to be that X who they rely on in those one-on-one situations. So one, you kind of touched on it already, but if he does end up being, they say, hey, we're going to stick you in one spot and make sure you learn this. If he is in that X receiver role, why do you think he could succeed or struggle in that role? And then any of the small details that you see in his game that you want to make sure that Patriots fans can appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of it is that we have to contextualize where guys make errors and prioritize how important or how much gravity those errors have. Because it's easy to point out errors, and you'll see this a lot with draft analysis out there, is that whether it's amateur draft analysis or whether it's professional draft analysis, you're going to see people say, ooh, that was a mistake. How did you not see that? And then when somebody makes a pivotal mistake later on, you go, see, I told you this guy does this, and this is awful. This is why he's not going to be any good. When really it's far more nuanced than that. So when you look at Baker, he's one of those guys that he gets his hands together as he begins to attack the ball, and then kind of has this second thought where he the hands drift. So like ideally you want your hands to be together. Right. What he ends up doing is his hands are together, and then at the last minute he does this. It's like that quarterback who pats the ball before he brings it back and throws it. So it's a little bit of this thing that he's just got to kind of iron out of his game, but he makes a lot of tough catches. So when I look at a player like this, if he's dropping the ball a lot and he's not making the tough plays, he's not making plays against contact, and it's due to forced and unforced errors, but the unforced errors are his technique. That's an issue. But he tracks the ball really well. He can make some spectacular grabs, make some really tough catches. So this is more about lapses where if you see him, he's probably going to do well in camp. He's probably going to do well in the preseason. But when he has to face like the top corner on the opposing team in a contested scenario, and he has to earn the ball with perfect technique because the guy's glued to his back, that's where you're going to say, can he shore this up? This is the difference between him being, your reliable X for a long time who earns a second contract, and at maybe mid-tier being a Cortland Sutton type who you have to feed him the ball multiple times, but if you feed him enough, he's going to give you big plays. But you hope there's enough surrounding talent there that can pick up the slack in case he gets off to a slow start and your team doesn't suffer for his slow start, that you find someone else can make a big play. Or is it really a top guy like a Brandon Ayuk is starting to become, or what Stephon Diggs has been in your division for a while, which is 3rd and 16, timing route. Jalen Ramsey's covering him. Jalen Ramsey knows it's coming, and he still hits him on that timing route, contested play, perfect, first down late in the game, and nobody could stop it. Antonio Brown late, mid-career, that kind of thing. If Baker can shore up his hands, he can be more in that, closer to that tier. If he can't shore it up, then he may be more in the range of a Cortland Sutton type who you're like, okay, he's good enough, but he wants more money. We want to trade him because he's not great. Nobody really wants to take him because they know they got to feed him the ball 8 times for him to catch it 5. And those 3 big drops we might not be able to make up.
Yeah. Also, another comparison that you brought, not a comparison, but another name that you brought up that reminded me of Javon Baker when I was watching him. Thought of Stephon Diggs, in a much less consistent and refined Stephon Diggs, which is the difference. Like, that's what makes Diggs such a great player. But when you're looking at an X receiver and you're building him in a lab, they don't really look like Baker or Diggs. They don't have the elite size, and they're not the fastest guys, but it's the mentality and the route running and then that work at the catch point where it's just like, even if they're covered, they're probably going to make the catch. But also, they can separate and get a lot of room against some of the less nuanced guys where you can see how they can beat both levels of competition. Now, with Baker, I agree. If I'm thinking about like him against Gonzo, it's like, yeah, Gonzo's probably going to lock him up. He'll make a couple crazy catches, but with someone who's not afraid of his athleticism and who could probably stick in his hip with the routes because he just doesn't really have any fear, I feel like that's where you're going to maybe see Baker be more human. But at the same time, where I really believe that this guy is going to be a star is in the mentality. I don't know if you saw Steve Smith's episode where he kind of broke down Baker's game and Baker came on. They were talking about Pat Surtain and how it kind of changed the way that Baker thought he had to prepare for guys. And one thing that he mentioned was kind of like how Kobe back in the day would like play with his offhand in tournaments because he wanted to get better. Baker said he doesn't want to attack a guy's weaknesses. He wants to attack their strengths so he can see how he matches up. And that kind of mentality, like you don't hear that from most people. I heard it was like, oh, this dude, he's got that, like he's off in a good way where you're like, this dude is about football. He's going to try to be better and he's going to be relentless. And that's the kind of thing I think about where he's going to be going up against a good corner in practice. And then he'll see on a pretty minute level, all right, I can't do this or I need to get better at this, and slowly start to build and kind of be that more complete receiver where, again, like a Stephon Diggs, he's elite because he doesn't lose and he just does the right thing so consistently.
Well, one of the things that he does really well that you just highlighted is that it's called stealing a release. And what that is that when you're facing a defender in one-on-one in coverage, when it's a play that you know you're not getting the ball or it's a run play, that type of thing, you're going to try and use certain release packages to gauge how the defender reacts to them. And then you use that to set them up later with routes. And that's a lot of what you just heard, what you described. There's a lot of that of what Baker's doing. And I would say of the two receivers we're talking about today, Baker's the more nuanced route technician with being able to use that patience and suddenness contrast to set up routes. He's also, I think he's a little better with releases with his hands in terms of how to using them to earn position. And I think he sells his routes pretty effectively at this point. And I'll just joke because it's kind of fun to do is that, I'll do, first of all, I love Steve Smith. I revere Steve Smith's game. And the way that he played and he's absolutely one of my favorite all-time receivers. Haven't had a chance to watch those, but I'll joke as someone who's had my YouTube channel for a long time and has known Josh Norris for quite a while over at Underdog. Josh will probably be the first to tell you that he would see me every year and go, just so you know, I'm going to steal from you again this year in terms of what I do, in terms of what's going on. So I like the fact that he stole the idea of watching film with people and had the financial capital to, with the help of Mark Cuban and folks like that, to get football players on to do it. So good on him that's working out, that, whereas I would occasionally get a Jamal Williams, he's permanently got a Steve Smith or a quarterback on there doing their thing. So, if you're going to steal something, you might as well make it work to your maximum. And he's done a great job of building on that.
Game recognized game, man.
That's right.
That's just great understanding. Hey, I took a page out of your book too during the season. I also got to get you on for a film room episode, but man, you blazed a trail. You did a great job. And now we've gotten to learn from that. We are going to have one more question before we get you out of here. But first, quick word from our friends at Game Time. Be right back. With the NBA playoffs in full swing and the Celtics looking like the best team in the East, I'm trying to go to a game so I can witness their greatness in person. And to get those tickets, I'm going to be using Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Buying tickets on Game Time is extremely easy. All you have to do is click on the team that you want to see, browse through the available options, then click on those games. Then you can go through filters like price, where you want your seat to be, all that good stuff. Click, get a panoramic view of the seat that you're going to buy, and it can be as easy as a one-click purchase for your ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Matt, last thing before we get you out of here. Let's set some realistic expectations. We've sung the praises of Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, but of course, these are still young guys who are coming into an offense that's going through a lot of change. So what do you think we can expect from both Polk and Baker, and what you think their roles are going to be, at least early on in the season before they really start picking up steam?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, Demario Douglas has earned his way into that slot role. So he's kind of cemented in there. And then, Juju, certainly a worthwhile veteran who, when he's healthy and he's on his game, he can be a very helpful player also in his own right. Kendrick Bourne's coming back from injury, might be the best player you have outside right now in terms of what he offers as a veteran who understands the pro game. Yep. And then after that, everything's up for grabs. Kayshon Boutte, certainly as a player in terms of ability and what he's capable of being, he could somehow be a spoiler in all of this if he gets his game together. But we don't know whether or not that's going to happen at this stage. Does he get played a little bit, made some mistakes, get the Ramondre Stevenson treatment, and then comes back and, he's working all that time behind the scenes? Well, we always knew Ramondre was a worker. I'm not sure. We'll see about Kayshon Boutte. We'll see whether or not it clicks for him. So with that in mind, I think realistically what you're going to see is Javon Baker is probably going to get a shot to probably start, I think, as a flanker. I could see that possibility happening, or to be able to play two roles. And then I think Polk is going to be that guy you use in 4 receiver sets, who's going to play inside and have him run routes that break to the outside, deep flag routes, corner routes, out routes. And then also occasionally you're going to see him on deep crossing routes, areas where he can kind of win the ball off play action, matched up against safeties and earn position, or win against zone. And then with Baker, depending on how well he adapts quickly, could be that guy that earns his way into a flanker role, early on in camp, or at the very least is put in 3 receiver sets. So for me, if you're going to comp a type of player, I would say Baker's going to be kind of like an upgrade to Van Jefferson immediately off the bat. Like if Van Jefferson at his best with Matthew Stafford with the Rams, where you could get 500 to 700 yards out of him and maybe 4 to 6 touchdowns at best, year one. That would be realistic if he has a good preseason. I think that's a realistic ceiling. And then with Polk, I think you're seeing more of a Marquez Callaway type of role right off the bat. And what I described for Polk is that Marquez Callaway role, where you use him inside out. Occasionally, maybe you'll use him where you can get him outside and match him up on some fade routes and things like that. And so I think he's also a guy that's probably going to give you probably more like 300 to 500 yards, 2 to 3 touchdowns. And I think that you'll see bright spots with him, and you'll have folks who are like, forget about those bright spots and tell you that he stinks or he's not good enough. And then there'll be other folks who will tell you, no, did you see this game here and this one play there? And they just won't know how to weigh it with the gravity that you need. But Polk to me still has, good opportunities there. You're going to see him more maybe in 3 receiver sets where they scheme plays and let him run after the catch and do some of what Juju did early in his career with the Steelers, where you can get him be a runner after the catch like that. And they'll both get those on RPOs and short, quick hitting routes, and maybe some double moves down the field that end with, or play action that end with them matched up against the safety, hopefully.
Those all sound like Alex Van Pelt. He doesn't get a lot of credit for how creative and how versatile his offense is, but especially he's been emphasizing play action. I think those are the opportunities, like you mentioned, where these 2 young guys are really going to thrive, kind of make their lives easier. Just stay ahead of the chains and make sure you're not forcing these guys into tough situations. Matt, pleasure as always, brother. Thank you so much for coming on again. Please let the people know where they can find you and what great stuff you got coming down the pipeline that we should be looking out for.
Sure. If you're a fantasy player, the Rookie Scouting Portfolio has a post-draft edition that comes out a week after the draft. I put it out Saturday. It's 120 pages of re-ranking players based on player fit. You get a cheat sheet that's of 220 players at the skill positions that are tiered and give you a sweet spot between where I rank them. So like if in the past, like Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or Nick Chubb or Cooper Kupp better than most people and maybe had them rated number 1 overall or top 5 overall. I didn't tell you that's where you should draft them. I show you based on their average draft position of leagues that I track and show you which ones I've tracked, what their average draft position is and where the sweet spot is of where you can take them. And I do depth chart analysis and things like that. And if you just want the straight money in terms of how players get scouted, the RSP is one of the 2 most purchased draft guides for independent research by scouts and NFL people, according to folks like Alex Brown, who is a recruiter at Ole Miss, used to be the head of recruiting at SMU. I contribute my scouting reports to Will Hewlett, who is a quarterback coach who works with Brock Purdy pre-draft and currently still with him, with Anthony Richardson and with Caleb Williams. So he and Tom Gormley, who's a biomechanics expert, they read my reports to get prepped for what they're going to work on with these guys. So you can get that there at mattwaldman.com. And I'm a senior staff writer at footballguys.com, one of the oldest fantasy websites out there, great group of people. And I'm always honored to be able to contribute there.
One of the absolute brightest in the business. A pleasure as always, brother. Thank you so much. And thank you all, as always, for watching. Now, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Stay on YouTube. We got Pat's Beat coming up next. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, y'all.